Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joe Piet, and I'll be your moderator for today. And this is what I think is going to be a really great conversation grounded in practicality and real-world examples. So looking forward to the conversation. Before we dive in, a quick note on the format. This is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch, share, and revisit the conversation after we release it. And once you've had a chance to watch, we'd love to hear your reaction. So feel free to make any comments or questions. We'll be responding to them. So don't hesitate to reach out. A little bit about Andrew Reise. Today the session is being hosted by Andrew Reise Consulting. I'm proud to be a part of that team. We're a management consulting firm specializing in CX, contact center, digital, and employee experience transformation. And we've been helping Fortune 1000 organizations turn customer insights into action since 2004. So this topic is squarely in our wheelhouse. So why are we here today? Most enterprise organizations already have voice of customer programs. The surveys, the dashboards, the analytics, the infrastructure exists. But the problem is not necessarily the amount of data. We hear from all of our clients that they have plenty of data. It's not the same as making decisions with that data. So today we're going to focus on that gap, the space between insight and action, and specifically how AI is changing what's possible as leaders like you are planning for the rest of 2026. A few things have shifted for sure, as we all know, and it's shifted fast. AI is no longer just a tool for collecting and organizing feedback. It's embedded into CX workflows, summarizing calls, flagging sentiment shifts, surfacing patterns across millions of actions in near real time. It's a powerful capability, but it also raises new questions. Who acts on the output? Who owns the decision-making? Who owns the AI output? Confidentiality issues, privacy issues, and does AI actually lead to better outcomes? The organizations that seem to be getting the most out of VOC aren't necessarily the ones with the best technology. They're the ones who figured out how to connect insight to accountability. So that's what we're going to dig into today and understand what's actually working in practice. But without further ado, let me introduce the rest of the team on this call. We have three outstanding practitioners joining us today who bring real world perspective to these questions. I'll let each one of them introduce themselves, who they are, their current role, and maybe a sentence or two about what brings them to this conversation. We'll start with you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Glad to be here. So my name's Dan Arthur. I lead our research practice as well as account management for Andrew Reise. And I've been doing CX and voice of customer since 2009. So really looking forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic. Katie?
Thanks, Joe. I'm Katie Sexton. I am one of the directors here at Andrew Reise. I've been doing voice of customer and CX work for probably since 2006, 2007. And I work with a lot of our clients and team members who support our clients on voice of customer and customer experience strategy and research projects as well.
Thanks, Katie. And Zach.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Van Dole. I'm a director here at Andrew Reise as well. I run CX and VOC programs across many different industries. Most of my work involves helping customers close that gap between what the customers are saying and what organizations are actually doing about it. And honestly, lately, how they can leverage AI to do so. Happy to be here and looking forward to getting into it.
So these are the big brains of the operation. Let's see what we can pull from the big brains. But before we get into AI specifically, when we were prepping for this conversation, we started to talk about the importance for our clients and for others to establish the big picture. Because in order to understand where AI fits in the VOC conversation, we first need to understand where VOC itself stands heading into 2026 and for the rest of 2026. So Dan, we'll start with you. Let's hear your take on this first. As leaders are planning for the rest of 2026, what should they start, stop, or continue when it comes to the voice of customer?
Yeah, good question. So I think for some organizations, this is going to be a start. Others, it may be a continue or expand. But key to the topic of today. We're talking about AI and VOC. So if you haven't started exploring AI and how it can improve your voice of customer program and drive efficiency and additional insights, like 2026 is the year to do that. So a lot of existing VOC or customer feedback management platforms, they have, some pretty cool capabilities already from an AI perspective that you may already have access to or may require an upgrade. But things like intelligent open ends, so you can get more insights from your qualitative and quantitative feedback, helping with analysis of the data that's coming back from those open ends, even helping like program surveys, right? A lot of that can be done more effectively and efficiently using AI today. And outside of different VOC platforms too, obviously, you have ChatGPT and Copilot and Claude, and those have been around for a while. But some of these, AI models are making leaps and bounds, within the last just few weeks or even months. And so, we're doing a lot with Claude right now to build, skills and agents to help do some of those, more routine analysis tasks, so that essentially what you're doing is you're serving up insights faster, and you're uncovering some insights, using it as a starting point, right, for your analysis, that will help you then kind of peel the onion back that maybe you wouldn't have identified from the data through traditional methods. So it's not the end all be all. It's kind of let's leverage the AI capabilities as a starting point, as it'll help us scale and maybe identify some things that we haven't come across yet, but can really help with efficiency and delivering insights across the organization. And then I would say the last thing that we're starting to see some traction on is around when you think about like qualitative research to inform your VOC programs, leveraging some of the AI moderated capabilities. Again, not as a replacement to those traditional moderated interviews, but to help you scale quickly and kind of do some exploratory up front, and then come back with a more granular fine-tooth comb to dive into the specific insights that you learned from the AI moderation. So that's kind of my initial thoughts around some things you can be doing in 2026, depending on where you're at in your AI maturity.
So leverage existing tools you might have that they might have additions to or add-ons for AI. Start using, if you haven't already started, third party like Claude, ChatGPT, and then look at other vendors like to do things like moderated interviews as such, right?
Yeah. So all of those capabilities exist today, and it's just a matter of adopting and learning and building on top of what's out there.
Okay. Katie, Zach, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll jump in here real quick and add something. So really for me, right, as we head into 26 and even through the end of the year, right, I think we're going through this shift where VOC has largely been treated as like a measurement program, but now we're moving into more of an intelligence type of program, where the foundational pieces, so the structure by which the AI will use, so you think of the transactional, the relationships, the unsolicited signals, which is like reviews, support, social, all that kind of stuff is going to be extremely important to be able to funnel into these AI models, so that we're able to connect all this VOC data ultimately to the customer outcomes, which would be your operational data, which might be their purchase, their churn, if their lifetime value, those types of metrics, which largely have been maybe a little bit more difficult to connect in the past, are becoming much, much easier. And then from that, we can honestly publish this VOC impact ledger, where it's like a running record of decisions that are actually made because of VOC. And we're able to see like what was that impact and actually measure that now in a much easier way. Whereas before, you may have had to have a lot of those pieces, and only the really mature organizations could have done this. I think AI is really dropping that and making it so that all organizations are going to have the capability to do this.
I like that. There's a couple of good comments in there. I like the metrics to intelligence, moving from metrics to more of an intelligence data set, and the VOC input impact ledger, which is kind of that whole question around what's the ROI of VOC? And I think that's what you're referring to, right?
Yep.
Katie, anything additional?
I would echo. I think these were emphasized a little bit by both Dan and Zach. But for years we've talked about Voice of the Customer as a program, and it's a program that lives in an organization. And I think what AI enables us to do, it gives us the tools to kind of augment the VOC and have it as more of like an infrastructure. And so thinking of it, I think when we think of start, stop, continue. It's almost like a mind shift for leaders and organizations to kind of think of VOC as that infrastructure now, and what tools do I have in place, on top of what I already have? How can I use AI to augment that infrastructure for Voice of the Customer, because it allows us to have that always on listening.
Yeah, that's awesome. So moving from a program to more of an infrastructure because of the tools that are available.
Right.
And that infrastructure consists of the AI components that you're talking about, Katie?
Yes, for sure. It augments the tools that we already have in place.
So start thinking of your VOC program as more of an infrastructure, and start leveraging AI within that. What should we stop doing? Stop thinking of it as a program?
I think so.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Any other comments on what leaders should start, stop, and continue? One of the things, just as a side comment, one of the things that we often hear about stopping is over surveying customers. Is that something that AI is going to help with?
Over serving in the sense of like surveys, you mean, like direct feedback?
Yes, exactly.
I think it's obviously the natural progression, right? Where it's all of our feedback has largely come through traditional survey methods, and all we've seen is survey completions drop. But what I think AI does, it allows us to create these quantitative models to be able to predict based off of potentially operational or unsolicited metrics, what persona they might be, how we begin to target them, how, what frustration or issues could they potentially have, so that we can anticipate and be able to jump in those journeys much sooner rather than waiting and being reactive.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, piggybacking on Katie's starting to set up the infrastructure for that, you can start with, speech and text analytics and leveraging contact center data or operational data on the website, et cetera, right? And bringing that together and having AI help with understanding that reams of data versus over serving customers.
Yep.
All right. Next question for you, Katie. Where does VOC most commonly break down between insight and action today?
Great question, Joe. So, in my experience working with clients, and I think what, the clients that we work with, data is not the problem, right? Like, there is more than enough voice of customer data to go around. I think we see some organizations do that well in collecting it. But where that opportunity is what do we do with it, right? And how is that rhythm set up? How is that organizational design set up for enabling action? And so a lot of times we see voice of customer, customer experience teams, own the voice of customer. They're the ones seeing it. So they produce great insights, but getting it into the right hands in order for action to be taken, like their business partners or the operational leaders or the functional owners, that's where the opportunity is. So how do we kind of capitalize on that opportunity? It's packaging it, I think, in such a way that we not only give the great insight and the great, finding from the VOC data, but we also deliver it with a recommendation or a recommended action, who should own it, and here's the impact of this recommendation. And I think that's what will get leaders' attention. I think that's where we see traction the most is when that recommendation is delivered along with the insight. I think a challenge with that is it's really hard sometimes to identify who those owners are, especially a lot of times, like if for example, you have like onboarding and support, and that pain point that you're trying to solve for kind of sits in between. And I think that's where it's really critical for assignments to be made to different voice of customer themes. So again, it does get in the right hands of those operational leaders. And I think from an AI perspective, where AI can benefit us is helping us to move quickly with that. So, we're capturing this data in real time, we're processing it in real time, analyzing it. And we don't, because we can move quickly, we can act on it quickly and not lose the momentum and try to turn that moment around for the customer. So my thoughts on it, Joe.
Fantastic. So having VOC, so the breakdown between insight and action today, and one of them is making sure that there's a recommended action for the insights that you get and determining who owns it. But there can be some issues in finding out who owns it and finding the people with the authority to act within that ownership, right? And then AI, the positive is getting real-time information so that insight to action can happen more quickly, right?
That's correct. I think one thing I would add is, a lot of times it might take weeks for us to collect the data, make sense of it, start to develop a plan to take action on it. With AI, it's happening fast. So we need to keep up with the speed of that and being prepared to keep up with the speed of that.
Yeah. Is there ever a trust issue with, like if the CX, like you said, usually it's the CX folks or insights folks that own that data and make the recommendation. Is there ever a trust issue with the data that they're giving, or any type of, they don't believe that the data reflects reality, or that they don't want to act on it in that sense?
I do think we've seen that, and there can be a trust issue. I think to kind of work around that trust issue, it's involving them in it from the beginning, making them a part of it, however it's collected from the start, versus it being a surprise, presenting it back to them.
Yeah, great comment. So back to your original comment of recommended action and who owns it. You don't want to just spring it on someone who owns it at the very end and say, you got to do this. You want them to be a part of the whole process. Okay. Any other comments? Dan, Zach?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add, with ownership sometimes being a challenge, right? Oftentimes you'll capture voice of customer feedback and insights. Maybe it's related to a product or service, but customers are giving you feedback on another part of the journey, like specific to a process or a policy that's really impacting their experience. And of course, there's different teams behind the scene that own that experience. So I'm a big fan of, democratizing access to those insights, so that even though the marketing team is doing a VOC program or study over here, if the operation team can learn from that data, even though 80% of it's marketing focused, there may be 10 or 20% that could be very insightful for the operations team, making sure that's shared effectively, so that not necessarily to assign ownership to it, but so that they can internalize that within their touch points with the customers, and make changes or adjustments as needed.
I think that democratization of the data is a struggle for some organizations, correct?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just some organizations want to control the narrative and the data a little bit. Others just the ability to share it. or doing it in a way where you're not calling out one department or the other for how the experience is going. Things like that can come up, but ultimately everyone's job, right, is to create a better customer experience. So the more feedback and data you get from your customers to help solve those problems and meet those unmet needs, the better.
And is that part of what Katie was talking about, bringing people together as part of the process in order to democratize that data as well as the infrastructure? Is that how you get
Yeah,
over
I think
that?
so. We've had clients have had a lot of success with monthly or quarterly VOC like insight sharing sessions or VOC council meetings, right, where it gives other people that aren't as close to it the opportunity to see and hear what customers are saying. So things like that can help.
Great, great. Probably some governance around that too, right? And Zach, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of echo what Katie said. I kind of see two problems. One, I think Katie hit the nail on the head where, CX owns a lot of the insights generated, but they rarely have a budget line. It usually goes to product or ops or web or whoever it is, right? They're the ones that have the budget line to be able to make that decision. So it's being able to connect that. But I think a lot of this breaks down when we speak in CX scores and themes, and we don't necessarily speak how the rest of the business speaks, which they're speaking in revenue or risk or effort, right? A lot of those top line metrics, we speak more in experiential scores. And so being able to tie those together really drives home the impact of whatever the CX team is recommending.
And Zach, great point. So, and when you say experiential scores, you're talking NPS, customer sat,
Yeah,
easy to do business with, those types of things, trust, right?
right. Yep. All of those things it's great to have a high CSAT or a high NPS. But, what does a high NPS mean for us as a bottom line revenue? Are we ending up spending more to chase a number that doesn't have any, bottom line impact to us? Or are we chasing the wrong number? Are we chasing NPS and it's actually a customer effort score that's probably a better score for us to go after? For every 1 point reduction in customer effort, we're seeing a 0.1% impact in revenue, right? Like those types of metrics and correlations are extremely important to draw on.
Yeah. So if a customer sat score, as an example, is super high with a particular part of the journey, but it's not meeting a singular metric that's most important to the organization, like churn, right? You're saying if that connection isn't there, you probably need to be measuring something else or making a better tie to the churn metrics, as an example.
Largely what we've done for a long time is measure things because we're supposed to, right? Like NPS was the metric that we were supposed to measure. I think what AI has done is reduce that time to be able to figure out what that metric is for us by being able to run these analyses at a much faster rate and kind of opening up this type of analysis to really even the smallest firms to understand this.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay. With that said, we've kind of been talking about voice of customer and AI, of course, but let's kind of have the rubber meet the road with AI and understand whether it really is closing the gap or in some cases adding new complexity to it. So Zach, this question's for you because there's obviously a lot of discussion around AI and the success of it right now, especially as it relates to voice of customer. Which AI use cases tied to VOC have actually changed decisions or behavior? Not just what sounds promising, right? But what's working in practice. So which AI use cases have tied to VOC have actually changed decisions or behaviors?
Yeah, I'll kind of give a couple that we've done personally. I think probably the biggest one for us is this shift in the IDI level surveys, right? Being able to draw insights from those and having AI moderated interviews. So no longer is a person needed to be able to have those conversations. We can use AI to be able to have those conversations and have follow-ups, which is really what the kind of the secret sauce of an interview was. You'd have a
And
prompt.
Zach, IDIs are in-depth interviews, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
For
I
just in
should have.
case. Okay.
Yep. For those that don't know, yeah, IDI is an in-depth interview. But
Sorry to
what
interrupt.
is
Go ahead.
all? Yeah, what has always been kind of the secret sauce of a person is being able to follow up on what somebody said. But what we're seeing is these AI moderated interview platforms have allowed us to have the standard prompt and then respond through, the natural language processing is, what's that follow-up question? And it's able to ask those follow-up questions so that if they answer it kind of vague, they could ask it and ask for more depth, or ask a series of follow-up questions that we may deem really important. So that's one use case that I think is helping us get insights faster. The other one is probably similar to this, but it's really like verbatim analyses and surveys, cutting those down. What used to take, if you had thousands and thousands of surveys, right, could have taken days or weeks, especially in large organizations. I mean, you're cutting all that time out that you've had and spent manually coding, and now it's done in kind of a pretty easy pass. So you're able to see what are those main themes, how many people are saying those, how impactful is it, and so you can, in very much in real time, kind of figure out what are those things that maybe we're not measuring that are becoming issues that we should be measuring.
Awesome. I have a feeling that as people are listening to you, great examples, the in-depth interviews and verbatim analysis, awesome examples. And Katie and Dan, I'd be interested in hearing more from you. But Zach, just a quick follow-up question. I have a feeling that people, as they're hearing this, are saying, okay, in-depth interviews, verbatim analysis, that's really private customer data. How do you get over the privacy and data security with AI? There's a lot of concern around that.
Yeah, I think a lot with AI, right, has got to be, it's going to come down to what your organization's stance is, right? Your organization needs to put governance around the use of AI and how you are going to use it, and how much data or what data is going to be exposed to it. And honestly, I think it even goes down to a model level, right? Like what companies or what models you're going to use on it, whether that be, you can look at a ChatGPT versus a Claude. Like, is one company going to act in a more of an ethical standard than the other? I think those are decisions that they have to, that are being made. So it really is going to come down to a company by company governance model that honestly needs to be thought of well ahead of time before even implementing these tools.
That's fair. Good answer. Dan,
agree. Yeah, totally agree. And that privacy security is important. And there's some things, you want to make sure the model's not biased in any way. So doing bias testing along the way. But I think ultimately, like, the output that's generated, right, is there still has to be a human in the loop to review and, iterate. Like, it's not like you just throw some data at the platform, it spits it out, and there you go, right? There's a process, review cycles, a series of prompts and things that you would go through. But ultimately, you still have that human in the loop that is reviewing and ensuring you're following the governance that hopefully is already set up from an AI perspective.
Yeah. Katie, any additional thoughts?
I think I have a thought around, I guess, building off both Zach and Dan of definitely having a human in the loop. Love the example of the AI, moderation. I think what AI allows us to do is kind of give us more time to focus on where we do need to have that human in the loop, right? So where do we need to have the human connection, the human conversation? Where do we need to establish some empathy, right? Where humans are never going away, right? But AI allows us to, again, I'm going to go back to augmentation. It allows us to augment in certain areas so that we can focus more on others, right? In some use cases. So I think that's what I would add there, Joe.
Yeah, that's great. So, what about compliance for different organizations? Are there like Andrew Reese is SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and that helps with some of the risk management with AI and then incorporating those tools into the workflows, even with a human interaction. Are there things like that organizations should be thinking about?
Yeah. So the typical like HIPAA, SOC 2, all of those, a lot of the platforms are, you know, certified for that. So that's probably step one for sure. So yeah, just check some of those things. Make sure you have the governance in place, the typical security profiles that you would have for any software, right? Before you turn it on and turn it loose with the organization.
Yeah.
And I'll add one
Any
thing, Joe,
Yeah,
to
go
this,
ahead.
right? Yeah, real quick. One thing is most of these models are one, not saving this data for long periods of time. So you want to check with every model how long that data is being saved. So I think a standard save is like 30 days, right? For most of these models. And does that fit the organization's risk threshold, right? The other piece to this is making sure that always you have that none of the data is training the models, right? It's housed within your own environment. You're not letting the data go to train the models. Generally, in an organizational type of account, that's going to be by default. But for the smaller companies that may be using more personal accounts, that's not always a default setting. So you need to make sure, hey, if we're going to try this out with a few people in our organization, just get a couple of personal accounts. You need to make sure that whatever is going into it, that you're not training these models, because that is going to reduce the security levels.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Okay, any other examples, real world examples where behaviors have been changed or decision making is being improved or leveraged with AI? Dan, you mentioned in-depth interviews, verbatim analysis, anything else?
I think I'll add one last thing. I kind of talked to it before, but like bringing all the data together to be able to make a better decision, right? Instead of having, this is all of our structured data through surveys. This is all of our unstructured data that we get through reviews and what have you, right? Like it's bringing all that together to be able to run deep dive analyses in a very, very short amount of time. We are literally doing this with our customers where we're bringing all this together and, writing honestly prompts to be able to kind of find those nuggets, to be able to see like what's really driving customer behavior, and then being able to kind of really hone in on, those outputs rather than, that could have taken months, if not years at some point. But I think being able to do this in real time has been kind of an unlock for a lot of companies.
Yeah. I know oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I would add, you asked for other real world examples, and I think I would build on just maybe application of the verbatim analysis, like Zach mentioned. You think of, it could come from surveys, it could come from chats, right? It could come from wherever you're collecting that unstructured data. And an application of that could not only be, insight identification, but maybe some churn signals, right? So, putting all the data together and who are your at-risk customers, based on what you're collecting there. So that's kind of another example that came to mind.
That's great. Thank you. I know our contact center folks would say speech and text analytics, wrap up, agents. There's a lot at the contact center too, from an AI use case perspective. Maybe that's for another call specific to the contact center. All right. Let's close the loop on accountability. I know that there was some talk about it previously in the conversation about who owns VOC action, but let's ask Dan, back to you. Who owns VOC insights and action, specifically the action part of it, and what has to change for it to actually work for some organizations that might be struggling?
Yeah. So for this, I think about, the traditional inner loop and outer loop. So you need to close the loop with the customer, right? And typically the VOC team, or working with a case management team, or will do that. I think probably in the near future, right? AI can probably do that pretty well. Um, but other than that specific piece, I honestly think the entire organization owns VOC action, and doing their part within where they can for their individual touch points, to improve the experience. And I think in order for everyone to be able to do that, they need kind of like that top down support and leadership from the C level. And really, it's kind of a cultural thing, to be able to feel confident and comfortable to leverage insights that you're seeing, and work, to make improvements, even though maybe that wasn't assigned to you or tasked to you, but bringing that up because it's the right thing to do for the customer. And so, um, that's kind of what I would say, more globally, right?
Yeah, great. Awesome comment. So inner and outer loop, keep that in mind, and Google it if you guys don't know what inner and outer loop is, but everyone owns it, right, Dan? Let me ask a follow-up question to everyone owning it from top down. You talked about leadership. How do you add, if everyone owns it, how do you add accountability, specific accountability to certain folks for taking that action?
Yeah. I think that shows up within just the metrics and measures that, um, individuals or departments are held to. So in theory, right, if you're doing what's right by the customer, that should improve your whatever CX metrics you're measuring. But then ultimately should roll down to, operational and financial metric improvement. So I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel on how you measure it. Just, what's good for the business and what's good for the customers, should capture that.
Nice. Zach, Katie, any other thoughts on ownership?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll echo Dan, right? Where really nobody's going to own it. I think there's definitely going to be roles, right? Everybody has their role to play within the organization, right? The CX team may own the signal or the story to it, and the sponsor, whoever that may be, ops product, might own the action. But I think it's everybody that's got to be held somewhat accountable to, if it's actually being done, because the CX team needs to be able to measure the impact to it, and then the product and ops team, who was the sponsor and the ones that spent money on it, has to be held accountable in the sense of, did it actually work, right? I also think that, like, in some ways, right, the CX and VOC has to be kind of given the same spot at the table as potentially like operational metrics, and obviously tying to those operational or financial metrics helps them do that, right? So that it feels like the company as a whole is involved in CX, and it's not just maybe something that we use to validate decisions that we've already made. And if it fits my decision, great, I'm going to champion it. If it doesn't, then, and it's kind of this inconvenient truth, then maybe I don't have tolerance for it. I'm not going to bring it to the table.
Good comments. Katie?
I think so. I agree. It can't be owned. I think what can be owned is the governance around it and the expectations that are set in terms of how often we're going to meet to talk about it. Here's how we're going to talk about it. Here's our standing agenda for it. And I think the goal with that over time is it may sound kind of cliche, but it starts to become like muscle memory for the organization, right? And everyone's expecting the fact that we went out and we asked for customer input and feedback, and have voice of the customer, and ready to take action on it, right? But I think having someone accountable for holding folks accountable, if that makes sense, is something that is important.
Awesome. That was our last question. You guys are off the hook for now. Let me see if I can summarize a lot of what we just heard, which is going to be hard to do because there was a lot, but what leaders should start thinking about if they haven't already in 2026, they should start thinking about, I heard a lot around AI, meaning if you haven't started using it, you should be, and you should be doing it with a governance structure and understanding of where AI fits into the broader VOC picture, as well as having the right accountability for taking that action. It's funny, as I was listening, I think, it always comes back to more of a strategic lens, right? So you've got a VOC program, or as Katie was saying, moving that to more of an infrastructure whereby you get that data and you can leverage AI to take that data and turn it into action as long as you have the right ownership. So as I think about it, again, you have to have the kind of the strategic view of voice of customer, and then understand where AI fits into it, right? So some of the classic things we've always talked about with voice of customer and insights to action around ownership and governance and the right structure and everybody's accountable and having the right metrics tied to business metrics, those types of things still are relevant. And we have to just kind of figure out, how does AI advance each one of those things? How did I do?
2 thumbs up, Joe.
Yeah.
Joe, you can run AI on the transcript after this, and we'll get a good summary for you.
Yeah, right. I should have. Yeah, I should have. That would have been a good idea. Okay, so thank you to the three of you. Sincere thank you for the conversation. You guys brought real grounded perspective to the conversation. Obviously, some great experiences to bring to the forefront with leveraging AI, and this is exactly the kind of roundtable that we wanted. And for everybody who's watching and joining this conversation, we appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. We hope this conversation gave you at least 1 or 2 things you can take directly into your 2026 planning for the rest of the year. If you have any questions or comments, or if this sparked any new ideas or things that we didn't cover that you are surprised we didn't cover and you'd like to hear more about, we want to hear from you. So please reach out to us either directly on LinkedIn, or you can come to our website and check us out too and respond there. But we'll be responding to questions and comments following this discussion. We're always happy to continue the conversation. And if there's anything specific that you're working through heading into 2026, that's exactly what we're here for. So please let us know. And thanks again to everyone. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Zach. And thank you to everyone who joined us today.
Thanks, Joe.